Hello, I'm Johnny Neill, and this is episode 0 of Writing is Dangerous. I'm going to keep it kind of brief. I'm just going to read the story, the original short story that we are adapting into a 30-minute episode over the course of season 1 of Writing is Dangerous, starring me, Johnny Neill, and my co host, Kyle Scott. I wrote this story my last semester of my undergrad, so it was a few years old. I'll just go ahead and read. And yeah. This is Totality by Johnny Neill, written 2021. Joel Kittredge checked his watch. 4:58, 12 seconds, 8:22, 2017. He had just finished loading the cameras and sound equipment into the van and was smoking a drum cigarette that he rolled for himself and sipping black coffee out of his big News 37 thermos mug. He was waiting for Troy West, the golden child of the Fayetteville, Arkansas news world. Their plan was to drive to the Katy Depot in Sedalia, Missouri to cover the total eclipse of the sun. The eclipse was going to be visible from anywhere in North America, but the totality, the science book illustration of what a solar eclipse is supposed to look like, would only be visible from within a 20-mile band that arched across the continent from Alabama to Oregon. It was a 4-hour drive for the event that started at 1, and he was ready to head out. He checked his watch again, 5:01:28. The watch was a solar-powered Casio G-Shock, and it kept perfect time, periodically synced by satellites even. Joel was left-handed, so he wore it on his right wrist. He had bought it 5 years earlier to encourage himself to jog. Good shoes, a watch with a timer, that was going to be the year. He never made a habit out of running, but he was happy with the watch. It was flat, didn't snag, it had a push-button light, and he could operate the stopwatch function without even looking. Best of all, it was solar-powered, so he never had to change the battery. The back of his junk drawer was a graveyard for all the old watches he never got around to replacing the batteries from. Joel didn't even have to reset this one for daylight savings time. Troy pulled into the parking lot and stepped out of his Subaru. He was carrying a box of donuts, his own News 37 mug, and his blue News Team blazer on a wooden hanger. Armed with his $1,000,000 smile, he asked, "I'm not late, am I, boss?" "Not with those donuts, you're not." Joel flicked his cigarette roach. He stood up and slid the door closed and headed around the front of the van. "But step on it, talent. We're burning daylight." The Katy Depot was the ideal place to cover the eclipse. It was no longer a functioning train station, but a state-run visitor center. Plenty of parking and wide open spaces to gather up if you wanted to look at the sky. Joel parked and went to work assembling the gear while Troy took a quick recon through the growing crowd. Other news crews had come in from all over. Joel hoisted his rig up onto his shoulder and walked out from the van to trade nods with the other cameramen, all of them staking their claims so they wouldn't end up in the backgrounds of each other's frames. Then he walked amidst the crowd to record some B-roll. He could almost smell the ozone coming off of so much fanciful anticipation. Teachers were corralling classrooms worth of children. Old men were showing off their telescopes. Carny barkers were selling fold-up cardboard eclipse-watching devices for $2 each, 3 for $10. Joel spied a hippie girl with flowers in her hair noodling on a ukulele. He wished he were as high as she was, but he was at work, and this was good enough straight. Back to the van, and Troy was knotting his tie in the mirror on the door and checking his teeth for embarrassments. He picked up the News 37 mic. Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. Sibilance, 2, 3, 4, sibilance. Check, check. Cameraman, how we sounding? How we sounding, cameraman? Joel was squatted down, preoccupied with setting up a second camera rig on the ground. This one was an astronomer's device that would track the sun while self-coordinating with the rotation of the Earth, equipped with a black lens filter to capture the corona. He knew that there would be plenty of footage of the eclipse on the wires, but the gearhead in Joel would not let him not film this event for himself. So he had borrowed the setup from the university. "Lingo Charlie, talent, Lingo Charlie. Sounding good, sounding good." "I don't like the looks of those hippies, cameraman," Troy said. "They sound like they might be getting ready for some kind of sacrifice." Joel looked out and saw the drum circle, 30 tattooed guys beating a pulse into the charged air. You better be scared of them, Talent, being as everybody knows they only sacrifice virgins. A virgin, Troy said. That ship sailed, brother. I'm a celebrity. An Arkansas celebrity, Talent. An Arkansas celebrity, Talent. Joel pronounced it Arkansas when he was feigning humility. But if you're willing to take one for the team, I could file a live celebrity sacrifice story, and I could probably win us a Pulitzer. Joel felt a great allegiance to Channel 37. They gave him an on-screen directed by credit for all of his stories, and he gave them his best. He had worked in Miami for 2 years before moving to Fayetteville, and they ran him like a disposable grunt out there. He braved rain and wind to get primo hurricane footage that got picked up by the networks, played over and over, national exposure that left him anonymous. He felt like part of the community in Fayetteville. He liked to think he made them feel safe. The crowd had grown to festival proportions, and everyone in it was stoked. Every few minutes, someone would shout out the countdown. 42 minutes! 28 minutes! Kids were waving bubble wands. Joel had been looking forward to this for weeks, and it was turning bigger and more exciting than he could have ever imagined. At 12:45, someone yelled, "It started!" and everyone sitting on blankets stood up like a herd summoned. A mass of people flowed apart into clumps. Conversation faded away. Couples held hands. The field of faces looked up into the brightness through their paper contraptions and welding masks. They saw the black circle of the moon edge down from the 10 o'clock position of the glaring white blur that was the sun. They began to hoop and holler. Joel felt like the sky took a sunset shade, but wasn't sure if he was making that up or not. The more centered the moon crept, the more defined became the sun. The darkness was not Joel's imagination, but it was a different kind of darkness, like a Magritte painting. Then it happened. The crowd saw the black disk of the moon slip center over the hot disk of the sun, the perfect fit rimmed with dancing spectral light. The sky dimmed to the black of tarnished silver, and the hooping silence fell into awe. Even the cicadas stopped. Joel reached across his body to press the timer buttons on his watch. He already knew that it was 1:17 p.m. The scientists and hobbyists had been crowing that number for days. He knew that the totality would last for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He had not planned to time the event, but in that moment he needed to record it with everything he could put his hands on. His camera was pointed at the crowd, but he was looking at the sun through the green glass of a welder's mask. His camera was pointed at the crowd, but he was looking at the sun through the green glass of a welder's mask lens that he had been carrying in his shirt pocket. He looked out at the people, all their heads tilted back in silent, primitive awe. He felt kinship with all of them and every long-gone caveman or Aztec who had been blessed enough to experience this same once-in-their-lifetime cosmic coincidence throughout all of history. He looked back up at the sun, this time without a lens between his eyes and the source of all known life. Quick, glancing peaks. Look away. Remember it. Look away. By 1:20, the moon was moving off the sun like an egg sliding off a pan. Joel hit the buttons on his watch. The cicadas exploded. The cheering started back. Clapping, whistling, drumming, and strumming. Troy jumped into the frame and gave a bright, excited blow-by-blow, and they knew they had the makings of another high-grade piece of West Kittredge television gold. They wrapped up with some quick after-footage, but were in a hurry to get back on Highway 60 to get the story home in time for the 5 o'clock news. Troy drove. Joel was downloading the camera's memory into his laptop when he looked at his watch. The screen was blank. He pressed the function buttons, but nothing happened. The light didn't come on. No numbers flashed. But they were playing Beat the Clock on a bigger scale, so he put it out of his mind. The watch buzzed when they crossed the state line. He had never once set its alarm. If he needed an alarm, he used his phone. When he looked, it was flashing 12 like his mother's VCR. He pressed its buttons. Nothing changed. Still flashed 12, but he was too busy to worry about it. Joel edited over 2 hours of footage down into 3 different segments. 1 6 minutes, 1 4, 1 3, plus a quick montage for commercials. They got to the station in time to broadcast the 6-minute story at the tail of the 5 o'clock broadcast. Troy introduced it live in the studio. They were welcomed back like returning astronauts. The citizens of Fayetteville had only a 60% eclipse, if they had even remembered to go outside at all. But thanks to Joel and Troy, they got to experience the totality. They got to see the hippie girl with the ukulele and listen to an old telescope guy who had waited his whole life to tell them about the heavens. And they didn't even have to get up off their couches for it. The news crew took Joel and Troy out for a happy hour celebration of wings and beers at the Drunken Chicken. Joel's girlfriend, Lola Zigerlinski, joined them after she got off work from the university library. They had been together almost a year and living together for 3 months. She was the first and only woman Joel had ever felt like he really might be in love with, and the first he had ever lived with, and he was at the point where he didn't know what was supposed to happen next. Joel played guitar with a loose roster of other folkies during open mic Sundays at Ike's Barbecue some weekend afternoons. It wasn't like they were a real band. It was more like their version of poker night. Lola had gone there with friends after they had all finished running a 10K, and after Joel and the boys had wrapped up their set with a rousing Knocking on Heaven's Door, she tipped a waitress to bring him over a smoked jalapeno sausage on a tortilla. The waitress placed it in Joel's hand and told him, "This is from the woman at the end of the bar," and walked away. But there was no bar. The whole setup was picnic tables on a mulch-covered yard. Joel was sitting there with his friends looking at him, holding up the sausage and looking around, amused and confused. There she was, sitting at a table with 3 other 30-something women wearing their race shirts and medals. She was looking at Joel and smiling, and Joel toasted her with his handful of barbecue, and she cracked up and toasted him with her beer. Joel walked over and introduced himself, and they'd been Lola and Joel and Lola, ever since. The happy hour ran long while Troy and Joel kept trying to describe the magic of the totality. "Check it out," Joel said. "It even fried my watch." But when he looked, the G-Shock was keeping fine time. Weatherman Mick asked Joel how he always got such great shots, how he always knew to have the camera pointed where the event was about to happen. "I just watch," Joel confessed. "I try to read the big picture and just let the camera do the work, like shooting skeet. I never shot skeet, but you know." The team got a text from the station manager telling them that the parent network was running the story on all their Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma 10 o'clock broadcasts. Tuesday morning, Joel's alarm went off at 4:40 like it always did. He sprung out of bed in the dark. Joel always woke up fully charged, and he moved like a cat, quiet to not wake up Lola. He always left the bathroom light on with the door cracked wide enough to light the bedroom, just enough for him to get dressed. He buckled his watch strap around his wrist, and the watch buzzed at him, and the tiny screen lit up. He looked at the face, and its LCD block letters read, "Boobs." Joel thought this was weird, but when he looked over at Lola, she was lying on her back, and her t-shirt had slid up over the tops of her breasts. Lola was a tumultuous sleeper whose covers often ended up on the floor. Her left knee was bent and raised, her right arm was over her eyes, and the sheet was wrapped around the left leg from the calf down. Joel was still not used to waking up with a woman every morning, and this peek gave him a voyeuristic tingle, and he gazed at her celestial body for a few moments and was counting himself lucky. He said to himself, "Thank you, watch," and she rolled over on her side and pulled her shirt down. He looked at his timepiece. It read 05:05. He looked at the alarm clock, and it read 5052. Joel was sitting at his kitchen table in the semi-dark, drinking his first cup of coffee and rolling some cigarettes for the day while scrolling through the texts on his phone. It hit him. Boobs was a punchline of what they used to call calculator jokes when he was in junior high. Boobs was 80085 in the LCD block font. He looked at his watch. There's no 80085 o'clock, 12 hour, 24. It didn't exist. Just then, the watch lighted up like a blue firefly had landed on his wrist. He thought about the eclipse, and he thought about Rod Serling, and how some part of him had always believed that unexplainable things had probably happened around him all his life, but he had not really noticed them because he was busy looking in another direction. Joel had spent a good deal of his 20s getting stoned and reading amateur writings about quantum mechanics as a means to deprogram his Southern Baptist upbringing. He had run many conversations into the ground on the insistence that there were no coincidences, that the only justice was cosmic justice, and that none of his failures were his fault. He had outgrown those postures, but he held on to an unarticulated idea that there was an intelligence force that ran through all things on a subatomic level. And he theorized that electronic processors, from this collective intelligence perspective, might act like prosthetic brain parts that were just smart enough to know that they wanted to be alive. That was why he liked digital imagery so much more than film or video. Joel didn't think of digital cameras as recording an event so much as cloning it and storing it for later. Unlike when he was in his 20s, Joel kept these thoughts to himself. Tuesday was doomed to be a letdown after Monday's big eclipse. Troy and Joel were dispatched to cover a spate of vandalism at a used car lot. Someone had taken a pickaxe to the windshields of 14 shiny, barely used vehicles. Surveillance footage caught a man in a hoodie who moved fast enough to beat feet before the alarms got any attention. The cars were insured and the cops didn't care. The dealer told them off camera that he suspected the culprit was a customer whose car had been repossessed, who got drunk and wreaked revenge in the middle of the night, and that he probably could figure out who it was after he looked through the receipts. There was no spin to put on this event, and they didn't make there was no spin to put on this event that didn't make Fayetteville feel scummy. This was the downer side of the news, just an ugly drag, and they wanted to cut it together and go home early. Troy was behind the wheel. Joel's watch buzzed, and when he looked at it, it read left. Joel said, "Take this left up here." Troy objected, but Joel said, "My feelers are up, man. Just take this left." The turn took them through a tree-filled neighborhood, and as they approached a side street cul-de-sac. The turn took them through a tree-filled neighborhood, and as they approached a side street cul-de-sac, they saw two police cruisers pulled over in front of a house. The blue lights were rolling, but the scene wasn't violent. Several little kids were standing around, straddling their bikes. The newsmen parked and got out. Troy approached the melee as Joel got his camera up. He looked through the viewfinder to see two women arguing with a uniformed cop standing in between them. At the end of the driveway was a folding table with a pitcher, a stack of plastic cups, and an ice chest. The sign read, "Lemonade, 25 cents. Behind it sat two adorable little girls who looked like their afternoon had been interrupted for the worst. The cop said, "God damn it, Troy, who called you in?" Everybody knew Troy. Troy said he was just driving by, but it looked like a story. The cop talked. No, nothing to see here. It's just fine. Go, Troy, move along." The cop was interrupted by the brown-haired woman. "I'll tell you what's going on, Troy. My little girl, Jolene," she gestured at the table where Joel was already recording a pigtailed cutie. "She and her friend Anita just want to sell some lemonade, that's all. Just because school started doesn't mean people don't still drink lemonade. They aren't hurting anything. Kids need stuff to do." The red-headed woman on the other side of the cop said, "Lois, I have put up with your little girl's lemonade stand all summer. Every single day I was blocked into my driveway, or I was blocked out of my driveway. These goddamn kids have been peeing in my bushes all summer long, and I've had enough. School has started. Time to put this little enterprise to bed, goddammit." She looked at Lois. "You kids go home." Lois yelled, "You hate children. You hate children and you hate lemonade." This was the kind of story Joel lived for. Troy squatted down behind the table to talk to the girls. Joel was sure to get a shot of him sipping from a cup and smiling. Joel said, "I guess we have to quit because the grown-ups are mad." Jolene said, "I guess we have to quit because the grown-ups are mad. Oh well, we made $43 apiece this summer. I guess that's enough." She batted her eyes for Joel's camera. "And now we get to be on TV." Troy spun the story into an assault on Norman Rockwell's America, and the whole thing was featured on the Today Show the very next morning. Weatherman Mick said, "You boys are on fire lately." Troy told him, "Al Roker said my name." On Saturday, Joel drank a gallon of coffee at Boulevard Espresso while he wrote in his journal. He was wondering by then if his watch had actually said or done anything, or if he had dreamed it and was now remembering everything wrong. One thing he was sure about, Troy was going to be leaving Fayetteville for a bigger house. Joel got some slap on the back accolades for the lemonade story, but Wednesday through Friday, Troy had spent all their van time returning phone calls from station managers and headhunters. When he'd had enough of scribbling his introspections, he went to browse at half-price books, but he wasn't feeling it. Joel's me-time habit was born from having spent his entire 20s in various houses with too many roommates. He told himself that this was an important part of who he was, but had lately felt like he might be happier staying home with Lola, or taking her with him, or going somewhere she might want to go. They were good together, but he was new at this, and thinking about Troy leaving triggered his pretzel logic, and he imagined Lola doing the same. He was scanning the shelf of books when his watch buzzed, and the time said, pawn. He pulled his pickup into the Cash US parking lot and wondered what he might find inside. He liked Cash US because he loved Muhammad Ali, and he could call the place Cassius. The cobweb on the door rung its clunk, and the cowbell on the door rung its clunk, and Chandru, the store's proprietor, greeted him from behind the counter. "Mr. Joel, so happy to see you this fine day, sir. I see your news video story about the angry ladies on the Good Morning Show." "Oh, hey, Chandru." Joel was surprised. "Yeah, that was a lot of fun." Joel wondered how Troy did it. Every encounter Troy had seemed like he was walking into a surprise party. Joel liked to think he could walk around under a giant pro camera rig and still nobody would notice him. He depended on it. "I'm just going to look around." "Of course, sir. Yes, of course." Joel walked past the glass counter to get to the electronics shelves. He glanced down and for the first time noticed all the engagement rings Cassius had in stock. 4 trays of ridged blue velvet, and every row filled with rings and settings ranging from tiny chips to multiple carats. Joel thought how the pawn shop status was not a testament to the power of marriage. He heard the door open behind him and the sound of Chandru greeting the other customer, but he paid it no mind because he saw a heavy aluminum music stand that was just like the one he used to have, but had forgotten that he had ever even owned. He picked it up as soon as he reached it and was delighted to remember its heft. The one he had before had disappeared one day, and he had never seen another one like it. He couldn't believe his luck. The thing had an 8-pound bass. It didn't just support sheet music. It could hold up hardbound volumes without tipping over. $15. Mission accomplished. As he carried it back toward the register, he realized that he was walking up on an armed... Oh, here we go. As he carried it back toward the register, he realized that he was walking up on an armed robbery. The customer that came in behind him was wearing a trucker's hat and big sunglasses and was pointing a gun at Chandru. The register was already open and emptied, and the merchant was bent forward, pulling the first tray of rings out of the display case. Joel saw this as if he were looking through a viewfinder. He did not feel a threat or even a connection, and he moved in closer as if to get a better shot. The robber did not detect Joel's approach, but Chandru did and looked up at him. Joel saw the fear on Chandru's face, and he saw the robber turn his head to see him. His close presence startled the man, and he fired the gun, shattering a pool hall Budweiser mirror on the wall behind the counter. Joel thought how he had never heard a gun fired indoors and how loud it was. And he thought, just pawn your gun. You don't have to rob anybody. Chandru covered his head when he heard the shot as shards of mirror rained down on him. The robber paused in the broken air, and Joel felt like this guy was going to go ahead and kill both of them because everything smelled like fireworks now, and what's 2 more bullets? Joel stopped in his tracks and leaned back as if to retreat. Joel stopped in his tracks and leaned back as if to retreat as the robber raised his gun. Joel's watch beeped, fast and loud, and the robber hesitated for a fraction of a heartbeat to look at it, and Joel swung the music stand as hard as he could against the armed man's skull. The man stumbled forward down onto the counter, stunned but conscious. Joel swung the stand against his head again, then a third time, like he was chopping wood. The glass broke under the robber's elbows. Chandru came from behind the counter with an aluminum bat and swung it down into the man's neck and head. The man fell to his knees and palms. Chandru stepped on the man's hand and struggled the gun out of it. The concussion caught up with the man's nerves and he threw up on the floor. Chandru kneeled down on top of him and he sank to the tiles. The man's fight had left him. Joel reached over the counter for the store phone and punched in 911. The police arrived in minutes and cuffed and disposed of the alleged into the back of a cruiser. They took the gun and Joel and Chandru's statements while Chandru cleaned up the man's stinking puke. Joel tried to film some footage with a piece from Chandru's inventory, but he couldn't do it. He was living this, not just watching it. He replayed it in his head, and it felt like he had taken forever to play out. He had replayed it in his head, and it felt like it had taken forever to play out, but the whole thing had happened in seconds. The police stayed for what felt like hours, and when they left, Chandru started sweeping up the mirror, and Joel followed them out. Joel made it as far as his truck, and then he remembered the music stand. He headed back inside, but he stopped in the doorway when he saw the music stand still right where he had left it, standing at attention on a wet floor near the register. Chandru said, "Oh, Mr. Joel, you're back so soon." Joel was thinking, did that really happen? But what he said was, "Can I still buy that music stand?" Come, please, sir, come in." Joel picked up the music stand to inspect it for blood, but there wasn't any, and he was glad. Chandru dropped a dustpan of glass pieces into a waste basket, and the shattering glass chimed around him. Joel looked at the counter and the blue trays that still had glass on them, and everything felt suspended and weightless. Joel looked at his watch, and his face read, "Yes." "Hey there, Mr. Chandru," Joel said. "You mind if I take a look at those engagement rings?" The end. Okay, so I wrote this story. Thanks for putting up with that. That was 26 minutes. I can see that as a half-hour episode. So I wrote this my third semester in a short story class. I had 1 week to write a story on mixed signals, I think was the theme, or the prompt, mixed signals. And my friend Joel is a news segment director in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and he had recently, well, it had been a couple of years, but he had sent me the story that he and his news guy covered in Sedonia, Missouri, and it was pretty cool. It had the drum circle, it had a lot of hippies and a lot of just a lot of wows and ahs. And then I got to see total eclipse here in where I live. The next one, a couple of years later, I got to experience the totality, and it really was a moving experience. And I encourage anybody who ever gets a chance to do that, go out of your way. I was very fortunate that it came right over, felt like it was right over my house. So then, and I had also bought a Casio G-Shock dive model, not the one I'm wearing now, that year, and had gone diving with it, and I just really fell in love with that watch. I had never really liked wearing a watch before, and then I found one that I just kind of fell in love with. So all of those things kind of came together, and I wrote this story in kind of one sitting, and when I look at it now, I can see that it really is a first draft. I think it's got some pretty good ideas in it, but by no means do I think it's something that I would submit. However, it has, when I wrote it, I pictured it as a half hour of television. I pictured it as a Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. It didn't feel hardcore enough. It felt a little too optimistic and chipper and modern for to compare it to a Twilight Zone. But those, the Steven Spielberg Amazing Stories from the 80s and then from a few years ago on Apple, had a kind of a corniness to them and a little bit of a, happy ending through whatever the amazing element was. So I wrote this for that, but I never got around to adapting it into a screenplay. So I'm going to do that now over the next 13 weeks with my co-host Kyle, and I hope you'll tune in for all of it. We're going to spend 3 weeks outlining, and which I've already kind of got a jump start on, and then 10 weeks, 3 pages per week to write the half-hour episode. It will be a standalone sci-fi light anthology episode, and I think it's going to be fun, and I hope you come along for the ride, because you must always remember that writing is dangerous.